A story that was comprehensible, characters that were developed and served a purpose to the story at hand, creativity, effort, and heart. These are just a few of the things that G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra had that G.I. Joe Retaliation did not. And this is the one everyone hates. G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra was harshly received by most critics upon its release. And it wasn't just them either. The YouTube Nation went nuts condemning this film for supposedly destroying their childhoods when their efforts would have been better spent ripping apart crap like Transformers 2 or Dragon Ball Evolution. But I digress. Not many people were too happy with this film, but I personally enjoyed it. It wasn't anything great, it wasn't complete with Oscar-worthy material, and the CGI was incredibly uneven, but regardless of that, The Rise of Cobra turned out to be a fun action movie, and in my opinion, that's all it had to be. The Rise of Cobra didn't need to be high art, and it never tried to be. It just strived to be as fun as possible, and yet it still managed to have character development, a decent story, good villains, and most of all, heart. None of which were found in G.I. Joe Retaliation. So let's talk about why G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra wasn't that bad, and why the hatred towards that film should be immediately refocused on Retaliation. So exactly what did The Rise of Cobra do right that Retaliation didn't? Well, first I'm just gonna get this one small thing out of the way. The Pit. The Pit was the G.I. Joe's base in the comics, and while the location of the Pit was ever-changing, it was always a well-protected base that was hard to infiltrate. Even when Cobra infiltrates the Pit in The Rise of Cobra, they have an incredibly hard time getting out of there due to all the protection provided by each and every Joe. Does the Pit appear in Retaliation? No! Because who wants a well-protected base that's hard to infiltrate and protects your soldiers when you could just have your base in the middle of the fucking desert with your soldiers standing around like sitting ducks being prone to more aerial and land attacks? Oh yeah! That seems like the more logical solution. Instead of being a hidden underground base where I can hide, have plenty of cover, and have access to a shit ton of weapons and machines that can help me the fuck out, I'd rather be in a base above ground with no cover and only my sidearm to fucking protect me. What idiot thought getting rid of the Pit was a good idea? On top of this, G.I. Joe technically doesn't exist. They are covert and secretive, which in turn gives them a reason for having a hidden base. But in Retaliation, the whole world apparently knows who they are, as Zartan makes the speech that the G.I. Joes were terminated with extreme prejudice. Since fucking when are people supposed to know who the G.I. Joes are? Again, like I said in the last video, if you were gonna derail so much from what the first film established, why the fuck didn't you just do a reboot? But I digress. Secondly, the Joes were done much better in Rise of Cobra. Duke is an army soldier with a troubled past who wants to redeem himself when his past comes back to haunt him. He has demons, he has weaknesses, but will always see each mission through to the best of his abilities regardless of that. Ripcord is Duke's best friend who always looks out for him. He develops an unforced relationship with Scarlet, and he wants to be an Air Force jet pilot, qualifying whenever he's on leave. And by the end of this film, he gets his wish. Scarlet is an intelligent fighter who doesn't like to lose, and when she does, she feels like she doesn't deserve sympathy. This, in fact, leads to a very nicely done scene with her and Ripcord. When she loses a hand-to-hand fight with the Baroness, she feels like a failure, because she was brought up from birth to be a fighter and to win. And it takes that fight for her to realize that she can't win everything no matter how hard she tries, which helped to make her a more identifiable character as opposed to just having someone bitching, "Daddy never loved me." Yes, he did. I'm not sad anymore. End pointless story arc. Snake Eyes is a dignified assassin who has taken a vow of silence and has sworn to avenge the death of his master at the hands of Storm Shadow. And no, don't give me that, "oh well, Zartan really did it" bullshit. Seriously, who would buy that crap? For the most part, they made Snake Eyes pretty damn complex, which can't be an easy task when your character is a mute. Then we have other characters like General Hawk, Breaker, and Heavy Duty, who, I'm not gonna lie, don't have much development. However, they all at least serve a purpose to the story and act like their respective characters are supposed to. General Hawk is the hard-as-nails leader of the Joes that he is supposed to be, Breaker is the technological genius that he is supposed to be, and Heavy Duty is the badass ordnance specialist that he is supposed to be. General Hawk serves a purpose by recruiting Duke and Ripcord, looking out for his team, and providing them with any cover and backup they may need, as well as saying the infamous G.I. Joe catchphrase, which was not said once during the entire runtime of Retaliation.
Knowing is half the battle.
We're worried on that one, dipshit.
Breaker, being the genius he is, figures out who the true villain is, gets information that the Joes could not otherwise retrieve, and manages to find out exactly where Cobra's base is at the end of the film. Heavy Duty helps Sergeant Stone train Duke and Ripcord, he issues the weapons, provides the cover for the Joes, and helps lead the full assault on the Cobra base at the end. They all have a purpose to serve to the story, and they have a lot more to offer as characters than any of the thinly written nothings in Retaliation. What do I know about Roadblock? I don't know. What do I know about Lady J? I don't know. What do I know about Flint? I don't know. What do I know about Jinx? I don't know. What do I know about Joe Colton? I don't know. Speaking just in terms of Retaliation, for a series that was built on the catchphrase, knowing is half the battle, I expected to know a lot more about the characters in your fucking movie! I knew about the Joes in Rise of Cobra. They were interesting and somewhat identifiable. I didn't learn jack shit about the goddamn characters in Retaliation. They aren't characters. I learned Lady J has daddy issues and Roadblock was a street fighter. God, I fucking wish. But yeah, that's it. So I ask, how is this bad and this good? Please inform me, I want to fucking know. Because I look here and I see characters and effort put into them. I look here, see nothing, and want to stab someone. Fucking Christ! Then we have, of course, the villains. Destro, Cobra Commander, the Baroness, and Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow, as I said in the last video, was given a lot of depth and backstory involving his rival, Snake Eyes. He regrets killing his master, is incredibly envious of Snake Eyes, and wants to prove that he is the superior. He's still the ruthless master assassin he was in the comics, and even though his relationship with Snake Eyes has changed, it made for some damn good drama. I especially like that scene where Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow go head-to-head at the end of the film, settling their rivalry once and for all. Compare this to him in Retaliation. In that film, almost nothing is done with this character, and there is no explanation to how he is alive. The most relevant thing he does is help Firefly bust Cobra Commander out of prison. That's it. And thinking about it, that even comes across as pointless because they do even less with Cobra Commander. I'm not even kidding. The Rise of Cobra took its time setting up Cobra Commander and Destro, and Cobra Commander has maybe 3 scenes in the whole film. I loved what they did with Cobra Commander in Rise of Cobra because it was the first time we got to see Cobra Commander fully fleshed out as a character. They actually gave him purpose and an identity. Now let's look at Retaliation. He doesn't do a damn thing but just stand around and act boring. He literally just stands around while everyone else does all the fucking work. Mastermind my ass. Why were you even in this movie? Just leave! James McCullen, who we come to know as Destro by Rise of Cobra's end, has the plan to hijack his own weapons from NATO and launch them at key points throughout the world so that when the world is in peril, they will turn to the one with the most power. In the end, we find out that he wasn't talking about himself, but rather the president, who he and the doctor have replaced with Zartan. That is fucking diabolical, and even if he lost, he would still have the failsafe of Zartan being the president. This plan was actually well thought out and made a lot more sense than whatever the hell Zartan was trying to do with the random-ass Zeus cannon in Retaliation. Retaliation didn't carry over this plot at all, or even build on it. The only thing they carried over was Zartan is the president. Oh well, fuck Rise of Cobra, we can do whatever the fuck we want. No, fuck you! They just introduced the Zeus cannon, which was totally pointless, wasn't mentioned at all in the last film, and in fact, only makes Cobra's motives between films more fucking confusing. Again, I ask, if you were going to do this, why didn't you just do a reboot? And I'm sorry, if Cobra Commander didn't need Destro at all, which is what we clearly see in Retaliation, then why the fuck did Cobra Commander save Destro at the end of the last film? If he didn't need him, why wouldn't he have just let him die? Yes, a lesson to all filmmakers out there and all future filmmakers. If you're opting to do a sequel instead of a reboot, you know what helps? Continuity! Now, I personally didn't like the way the Baroness was portrayed in The Rise of Cobra. When I think the Baroness, I think of that hot leather-wearing chick with the sexy foreign accent. Well, they got most of it right, just not the accent, and that was kind of a bummer. While making her a past love interest for Duke did give the story more conflict, it really just came off more as a tired cliche. So no, I'm not gonna defend that. However, even when I look at all the ways they screwed up the Baroness, she's still a better fucking villain than anyone in Retaliation. She wasn't great, nor was she entirely on point with her source character, but at the very least she was a clear fucking character and served some purpose to the story. In Retaliation, you could remove Cobra Commander or Storm Shadow or Firefly and you'd have the same fucking movie! And this is the one everyone is defending? Ah! Sorry, I lost my cool there, I apologize. Let's move on. Now let's look at the action scenes. I stand by my statement that the only worthwhile action scene in all of Retaliation was the fight with Snake Eyes and the Red Ninjas on the mountain. That scene was well made and is actually taken right out of the comics. That was fine. But most of the action scenes in this movie are random shootouts and horribly choreographed and directed hand-to-hand fights. There's nothing inventive at all. Now look at The Rise of Cobra. We have the ambush that introduces all the Joes showing off all their fighting strengths. We have the battle in the pit, which has sword fighting, hand-to-hand fights that are well directed, shootouts with Cobra's badass weaponry, and serves a purpose by bringing the Joes, especially Scarlet, down a notch. Remember, these are the alpha dogs of fighting, and having their base broken into, as well as failing to save the nanomite warheads from being stolen, makes them all step up their game. Then we get a badass chase scene through Paris, the Eiffel Tower being destroyed, and finally a giant climax at Cobra's base in Antarctica. The film's action scenes utilize several locations, several fighting styles, and most of all, they were fun. Nothing mind-blowing, but certainly nothing bad. I think my favorite action scene in the whole movie is just that whole climactic fight at the end with Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. That was just an ultimate fangasm for me. Now I just want to talk about one thing that most people are saying in defending G.I. Joe Retaliation. It feels more like G.I. Joe. How? I really want to know. How? Please, I'm all ears, fucking enlighten me. The sad thing about this is that most people can say that and yet also say that G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra was nothing like G.I. Joe. Oh, okay, let's examine this, shall we? The Eiffel Tower being destroyed is a direct reference to the first episode of the cartoon where Cobra Commander and Destro made the Eiffel Tower disappear. The nanomites came directly from an early issue of the G.I. Joe comics. Destro's company, Mars, which stands for Military Arms Research Syndicate and is in turn a reference to Mars, the Roman god of war, is also taken directly from the comics. The underwater battle cruisers, that was in the show and in the comics. The iconic underground base known as the Pit, in the comics. We hear the iconic catchphrase, knowing is half the battle, from General Hawk, as well as the Joe battle cry, Yo Joe, from Heavy Duty. It was in the show and the comics. The injections given by Cobra Commander to the Neo Vipers in Rise of Cobra leaves behind a scar in the shape of the old school Cobra logo from the show and the comics. Most of the big characters we loved in the show and the comics are here in the film. How is this not like G.I. Joe again? They reference the show, the comics, and the toy line a lot in this film within the story, just to make the fans happy, which is more than I can say for Retaliation, which didn't even fucking try. Hell, the scar on Duke's face in Rise of Cobra is a direct reference to the original G.I. Joe doll, for fuck's sake. Retaliation had none of this. It traded being fun for being incredibly stupid. I think I should also note that when Stephen Sommers was still attached to direct the sequel, the title was G.I. Joe Cobra Strikes, which was another wonderful homage, being that Cobra Strikes was the name of the very first episode of G.I. Joe. But no, instead John M. Chu took over the sequel and gave it the entirely forgettable and generic subtitle, Retaliation. Yet, everyone still thinks John M. Chu was more faithful to the source material than Sommers was. Huh. Now just comes the moment I'm sure everyone's been waiting for. What didn't I like in Rise of Cobra? Well, let's run down the list. Again, wasn't a fan of the way Baroness was portrayed, but in retrospect, she's still a better villain than anyone in Retaliation. The accelerator suits were fucking stupid, and were really only there to sell toys. Not that marketing to a newer generation of G.I. Joe fans is a bad thing, they just came off as stupid in the movie. I wish they had done more with General Hawk in the film. How Destro got his mask in the end by use of the nanomites I just thought was dumb and unnecessary, especially when he could have just put on the Destro mask that he had in his office. The CG was very uneven. At times it would look good, other times it would look like crap. And sinking ice? Yeah, I don't even really need to comment on that. So no, not everything in Rise of Cobra was good. In fact, some things were done very fucking poorly. However, when Stephen Sommers took up the task of directing The Rise of Cobra, he had one thing in mind: to have fun. A lot of fun can be had with the characters, locations, and weapons of G.I. Joe, and Stephen Sommers, as well as the screenwriters, took full advantage. Is it perfect? No. Is it an entirely accurate portrayal of G.I. Joe? No. But it is certainly better than whatever the fuck Retaliation was supposed to be. Stephen Sommers showed more heart and determination to make a fun film. And out of all the films released under the Hasbro name, I'm sorry, but The Rise of Cobra is the only one to get it right. It had a simple story, good characters with actual development, purpose, and equal screen time, and took every advantage to reference and homage the original source material while still creating new things for a younger generation to enjoy. I'm not saying you should love or like this film. Hell, if you hate it, you hate it. Not much I can really do to change your mind, but at least give credit where credit is due, and give no credit where no credit is due. At least with The Rise of Cobra, they fucking tried. Good night, folks.
This is General Hawk. The mission is a go.
Here they come.
Go, go, go!
We're running out of time. Eject! Real American heroes.